NVIDIA has been the talk of the market for more than 2 years now, but is it too late to be buying one of the hottest stocks that we have ever seen in the market, one of the most valuable companies in the world today? That's what I'm going to dig through. There's a lot of factors at play here, and NVIDIA is the clear leader in artificial intelligence chips, but there's more competition coming into the market. There's going to be even more competition as we go from pre-training models, spending billions and billions of dollars just building models, to test time compute. That's what ChatGPT's latest models are doing. They're running prompts through the model longer and longer. That doesn't necessarily make the same amount of sense on an NVIDIA chip as pre-training does. So does that mean that new chips like Inferentia from Amazon, TPUs from Alphabet, Facebook is making their own chips? There's startups making new chips. A lot of these chips are focused on the inference side, and it seems like that's where a lot of investment is going to go. So does that mean that NVIDIA is going to see less demand growth? And that's really the key number. Not that they're not going to grow, but does their growth rate slow? Do their margins start to fall as suppliers like TSMC start raising their prices to make chips? All of these things are going to factor into NVIDIA, and then we have to look at the price that investors are going to pay. NVIDIA is typically a very cyclical company. Doesn't mean that it doesn't have a very bright future, but it does mean that the stock is prone to go through massive drawdowns of 50, 70, 80%. And revenue doesn't grow linearly either. So I'm going to dig through all of this today and try to put some context to NVIDIA and whether investors should be interested in buying or potentially selling the stock right now. My name is Travis Hoium. Thanks for watching Asymmetric Investing. Please subscribe here on YouTube for all my content. And thanks to this video sponsor, The Motley Fool. If you go to fool.com/ASYM, they'll give you their top 10 stocks to buy right now. Let's start with NVIDIA's growth, because this is the most impressive thing about NVIDIA. And I'm going to start with this stacked chart. This just has all of their segments stacked together. You can see that the data center business, which in green basically didn't exist a decade ago, now that is a $100 billion business over the past 12 months. This is the trailing 12-month revenue, same data, since 2022. So you can see again, over the last 2 years, just phenomenal growth on the data center side. But it isn't just growth that investors are interested in, it's the rate of growth. And is the growth rate accelerating or decelerating? And we have seen just over the past couple of quarters that growth is decelerating at NVIDIA. And analysts are expecting that rate of growth to continue to decelerate. In fiscal 2027, the growth rate is expected to be just 21%. Now that's still a really phenomenal growth rate, but that's a much lower rate of growth than we've seen at over 100%, sometimes over 200% over the past couple of years. And the other thing to keep in mind with those estimates is that analysts are getting better at estimating how much demand there is for NVIDIA's chips, what their pricing is going to be, what their gross margins are going to be. So those huge earnings beats that were happening in 2023, earlier in 2024, those beat levels have gone down as analysts have gotten more of a handle on the business. So basically, they're able to price the future a little bit more accurately. And the other thing is NVIDIA has benefited from extremely high prices for their AI chips. Jensen Huang has basically been able to decide who the customers are going to be and what they're going to pay for all of these AI chips, H100s and now Blackwells. That's why you see margins just absolutely soaring. Historically, NVIDIA is more like a 50 to 60% margin business, but that has grown to 75% plus over the past year. But if we zoom in a little bit more, you can see that those margins are starting to come down. What's the reason for that? It's not necessarily more supply from competitors. It's that their supplier, TSMC, has been raising prices, and they're going to continue raising their prices. Basically, the chips that NVIDIA is designing can only be made by TSMC, and they know that. So they're going to be increasing their prices. They've started doing that in 2024. I would expect them to continue in 2025. That is going to eat into NVIDIA's margins. Doesn't mean that they're not still going to have a phenomenally profitable business. But if those margins go from 75% to 65%, that's a huge hit to the bottom line. And if that's happening as revenue growth is slowing, you're going to have less momentum on the bottom line in earnings per share growth. That's the thing I think investors really need to think about right now is, are they paying an appropriate price for the growth that's going to happen in the future? Don't just look back at what's happened in the past. What's going to happen in the future? Is NVIDIA as well placed today as they were 2 years ago? Probably not, because there's just more competition in the market. Everyone sees NVIDIA's opportunity and is going after it, at least piece by piece. Maybe not in the exact same way, but they're trying to offer value in different ways. On the inference side is something I talked about earlier. I think that's going to be a real place of competition over the next few years. Suppliers are taking their pound of flesh as well. So the real question comes down to, are we paying an appropriate price for the growth that's going to happen in the future at NVIDIA? And that's where I have a lot of questions. Thanks to our friends at The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/ASYM for the top 10 stocks to buy right now. If you look at Nvidia's price to sales multiple over the years, you can see that 2015, the price to sales multiple was between 2 and 3. The price to sales multiple alone, so not just the business, but the valuation of the business, the multiple that business has gone up 10x in the past decade, now at about 29 times revenue. This is one of the biggest companies in the world, and it is trading for 30 times revenue essentially. Now, growing. Now it's growing very quickly, but that is a very, very high price by any metric, by any historical standard. For context, at the peak in the dot-com bubble, Microsoft traded for about 25 times sales. But if you bought shares at the turn of the century and Microsoft continued to grow over the next decade and a half, by the beginning of 2015, 15 years later, shares were still down 20% from that peak. When that much growth is priced into a stock, a company has to grow at a tremendous level and they have to perform basically flawlessly to meet investors' lofty expectations. I think that's really the challenge for Nvidia today. As more competition comes into the market, Nvidia is going to have less pricing power. The market may actually move away from Nvidia because none of these huge hyperscalers, which are their biggest customers, want to be beholden to Nvidia long term. So they're going to try to figure out their own solutions. That's going to bring more competition into the market, whether it's their homegrown competition or whether it's competition from companies like AMD, Broadcom, NVIDIA, Broadcom, Intel even, although maybe to a much lesser extent. And we're already starting to see that impact on NVIDIA's bottom line. So is it too late to buy NVIDIA today? I think the answer to that is clearly yes. Paying this kind of multiple for a company of this size is just extremely risky for investors. It means that a company has to continue growing at 40, 50, 60% or more. And I just don't see the market doing that given the scale of investment that so many of these hyperscalers are making. We're not seeing a huge return from most of these AI companies, and they're already investing tens of billions of dollars per year. Is that investment going to go to hundreds of billions of dollars per year? I really have a lot of questions of whether there's that much money that is going to go into the data center in the future, especially just running on NVIDIA chips and giving NVIDIA all that power in the market. So I think the best days for the stock are behind us, and now is the time to be taking profits with NVIDIA. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe to Asymmetric Investing. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you here next time.